So a lot of stuff just going on with the Browns in the facility and the injury report in just a ton of different ways. And also it's Steelers week. So I like to bring on special guests for Steelers week. The first special guest I'm going to bring in, if you follow the Browns on Twitter, you know who this is. This is Cam Justice, works at WEWS 5, ABC, also the host of Next Man Up. Be sure to keep your eyes out on her social medias this weekend. She has a special one dropping. You want to make sure you follow her, Cam I Justice, just how you think it's spelled, Cam I Justice. So follow her on Twitter. Cam, nice to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting. This is my first time on your show, but I've heard nothing but great things about it. So this is big for me. I'm really excited to be here.
That's a relief. You've heard great things. All right. So I think the first thing I want to get into is this whole Baker Mayfield shoulder injury. It is the most mysterious shoulder injury of all time. It seems like every time I mention it, there's a new element in it, right? The first time he did it, and then they're like, oh, there's more to it than it seems. And then he played, then he goes out there, gets smashed by JJ Watt. And then now there's like a bone fracture. What exactly, to the best of your knowledge, as somebody who's down there at the facility, is really going on there with his shoulder?
So they're not giving us a lot, right? They're trying to keep it under wraps, and I get that, but things keep leaking here and there. New reports are coming out. So what we know is that initially in week 2, when he made that tackle, he had what we thought was a partially torn labrum. Now we're learning that it was fully torn, is what Baker Mayfield is saying, that it was a fully torn labrum. And then
Since week 2?
Since week 2.
Oh.
And then against the Cardinals, when JJ Watt sacked him, that initial hit redislocated it. And so then he obviously had to get it popped back in. And so that did a little bit more damage, but you could really see the damage, he said, afterwards, because on a non-contact play, not that sack, but later in the game when he came back in, he said it popped in and out again on a non-contact play, which means that the structure is just really not great there. If it's popping in and out on a non-contact play, you know that the structure has been damaged. And then so after that, we find out he gets ruled out. Right. And, your Case KEENUM is starting, and they're just going to see try to get Baker some rest. He did come out. He wasn't there in the opening portion of practice the week leading into the Broncos game. He walked down the field and threw after media left. But he wasn't in the show. He was limited and not really doing too much, and probably didn't want to be seen just in case. But they saw him throw the ball, and I think that's when they decided, get that shoulder some rest. Case KEENUM, you'll go in. But then it was during the game that we found out a report that Baker Mayfield said that he actually also fractured his humerus bone in the upper arm right by the shoulder where it connects. And so there is a fracture there, and that fracture happened when he dislocated it. I think probably either the first time or the second time, didn't see that clarification, but in one of the dislocations is when that fracture happened. And so now he's dealing with the torn labrum. He had to get that shoulder popped in after 2 dislocations and has a fracture on that bone in his upper arm.
Oh, man. So
it's a whirlwind.
A lot's going on. Yeah, and the weirdest thing about that injury is, to be honest with you, he looked kind of good when he came back into the game. I saw that injury on TV. I was like, he's got to be out for the year. Like, there's no way he can continue to play. Comes back, looks good. Then the story is he's not going to play Thursday. And then you see him on Thursday, and it didn't look like he could move his arm up. Like, he could do the elbow stuff, and you saw him doing some of that. But if he ever tried to lift, he never could lift that arm up. I'm just like, is that because of the bone fracture? Is it because of swelling? But he also wasn't in a sling, which was curious, because you would think he should probably be in a sling, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. So you saw it after the initial injury. You could see a little bit, not too much. I mean, it really did not throw him off totally just the injury itself in his mechanics. I don't think it really impacted it, other than that non-throwing arm when he went to go put his body into it. I have some videos, taken from practice where that elbow doesn't look like it's coming up as high. And that was the only thing that I really noticed about like a change. But his accuracy during practice was fine. He threw deep balls, and like he had the power behind it. He had the distance behind it. So that none of that really changed. And I thought, maybe it's really because that harness. I think the harness might have altered it less so than the pain. I think that he's been playing through the pain, and Baker Mayfield, as anyone knows, is tough, and he's very like vocal about how tough he wants to be, not just in what he's showing. He wants to make sure that everyone knows that he's not just going to sit down because it's a little bit of pain. So he'll play through the pain. I think a lot of that impact was from the shoulder harness that he was wearing in the games. Kind of restricts you. And Alex Van Pelt said it even, he said he tore his labrum, and that's a thing that if you're a quarterback, you're going to eventually tear your labrum. That's something that you're probably going to have to go through. And he said he's been in that situation as a quarterback where he was wearing a harness, and that can really alter how your body is moving and getting used to it. So I think that might have been a bigger factor than the pain until the Cardinals game. And I think that might have changed the pain factor a little bit more, because the more you hit it, it's already sore. You dislocate it again, and then it's popping out on non-contact. You're dealing with that pain then at every move. Every move you make, you have to be worried. Like, is this move going to take it out of socket? Is this move going to, cause me a bunch of pain? And so it's in your head, especially when it just happened like that. So I do think that it's impacted him. And I think that, he's got to play through that pain. But then the question becomes, are they going to be able to reduce that swelling? Like you said, are they going to be able to stabilize that shoulder in a way that it reduces the amount of pain and it reduces the way that he thinks about it? Because you can play through it all day long, but if you're thinking about it, then that's going to alter the way you move your body and the way you throw that ball and the way that even the footwork. He said his footwork was good before, but eventually it will become a full body process. If you're thinking about reducing the pain in your shoulder, you're going to start doing everything you can to not move in certain ways. And that's going to throw your body off. It's going to throw your hips off. It's going to throw your feet off. And so I think that's probably something that they're looking into. Like, hey, can we rest him? Is this going to be something that, can get better? The fracture is not going to heal in a game. That fracture is going to be there come Sunday, whether he plays or not. The question is, can they reduce that swelling, and can they get it stabilized enough where he's not feeling that pain at every turn, at every movement, so that he can focus on the game and not so much on that shoulder?
Yeah, and so if the shoulder can just kind of like stay in place too, that's got to be another thing that's kind of scary to think about, is that if it's just popping out, you know what I mean? But one thing I want to kind of get to know your thoughts on about this team, when you look at like it down the line, there's a lot invested, not just like in the next 2 years, but like specifically in this season for the Cleveland Browns. They have a ton of 1-year deals. Odell, Jarvis, like, if you're salary cap, people have been telling you might have to get rid of one of them, if not both of them, after this year. Like, you're going to start feeling the crunch of the cap after this year, especially. So this is really like an important year to go for it and to go for everything that you can. But you're looking at the AFC, and, Bengals are for real right now, right? They got Joe Burrow. They got a high-scoring offense. You got Justin Herbert. We already know how many points he can put up, especially, with the Browns don't play their best. Patrick Mahomes, you have to believe, eventually it's going to be Patrick Mahomes again. Lamar Jackson. Like, you can talk all day about all the high-scoring, high-efficiency offenses on this team's plate if you want to go and make the Super Bowl or do something or make a run this year. And no disrespect to Case Keenum, but Case Keenum has a long career. We kind of know what the deal is with Case Keenum. He's a 5-minute offense guy. He's a guy who you can win. If you just need to put up 20, 24 points, he'll be solid for you. But in those games where it becomes a shootout, that's where his limitations start to get exposed. And if you're Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry and you find out, hey, Baker Mayfield, the guy you're going to rely on to get you those 50 points in those shootouts, he's not going to be there for the rest of the season. You got Case Keenum, and Case going to get you through enough games. Like, you're not going to be terrible with Case Keenum, but you probably aren't going to have enough firepower offensively to reach your goals. And what at that point, what decision do you make there if it comes out that Baker's going to be out for the season? If you're the Browns, do you look to see if you can get somebody who can fit that role a little bit better, or do you just kind of ride it out with Case Keenum? Because it just seems like a lot's invested in this year to kind of just ride it out with Case if Baker's not going to be here for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and you would think that that would be if Baker were to be ruled out for the entire remainder of the season. And I would even say, into if it is pushing into the territory of a possible postseason, if he's past that point too, then you have to look, because Case Keenum could, in theory, get you enough wins to make a playoff push if Baker were to come back. So, and if you can rely on Case, if you are confident in Case enough to do that, then I think that you don't have to necessarily give away draft picks and all this stock that you have to get another quarterback if you are confident in that. But if it starts going into that territory of we might not have Baker in the postseason, even like one game in, that's where you have to start thinking about it. But then you also have to consider, is this your year? Is this the year that you think that you can really make not just a playoff push, a playoff run, but a Super Bowl appearance? Because we know that the Browns have been able, they did it last year. They made the playoffs. We know that with the offensive talent that they have, aside from Baker Mayfield, they have the offensive talent there to do it. They have one of the strongest offensive lines in the NFL. And they're getting healthy, right? And so when they're performing well, that offensive line deserves a lot of credit into this, because you could have Baker Mayfield, I don't know, is necessarily, I don't want anyone to think that I'm calling him a mediocre quarterback right now, but you can have a mediocre quarterback. Whatever you think about Baker, whatever you think about Case Keenum, you can have a mediocre quarterback and still find success if you have the other pieces, if your offense is running the way you want, and if your defense is on point. The Browns defense has shown that it can be on point. They've got the talent there too, and they've got the offensive weapons to make sure that happens. Now, what you need to see from the Browns is that consistency. The defense would have to step up with Case Keenum out, because they would need to reduce the number of points that the opposition is putting up, because Case Keenum's not going to give you 30, 40 points. That's not something that he's going to be able to do for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not what his role is. And he's a backup quarterback, and that's not the guy that he is. But what you need to be competent in your defense to hold the opposition down so you can win those games. But you also have to think, what are we going to do here with these salary caps? What are we going to do with Baker Mayfield? What are we going to do? Are they going to extend Wyatt Teller? Are they going to bring him back? Because that Wyatt Teller out would change the entire offensive line in itself. So those are decisions. Like, if this is your window, if this is your year, then I think that with Baker gone for the entire season, if they had to make that decision, they should 100% be looking elsewhere, looking outside, and trying to bring in somebody, because I just don't know that Case Keenum is that guy. He is a great backup quarterback, and he is great in the role for filling in a couple games, getting you those wins when you need them. He can be that kind of quarterback, but I don't know that he's the kind of quarterback that will lead you to where you need to be an extended amount of time. And I know there's a lot of fans who saw him and he performed well, and he can perform well, but we know who Case Keenum is. We have the numbers, we have the background. He's been doing this for a long time, and we know what his ceiling is. And so eventually I think you get down to these games, and you're going up against the Ravens, you're going up against the Packers, and you'll see just how steep of a drop-off his game can be compared to some of these other quarterbacks in the league. And then you start hurting and you start losing those games. And then, one day you wake up and then the Browns are out of the playoff picture and the playoff race if they don't win enough games. And it's just like, it's such a tight race too. The entire AFC is gunning for it. There's so many teams that are right there in the AFC North. One game behind, a third of the way through the season, it's neck and neck. And it really comes down to, it's going to come down to conference games. It's going to come down to how you play against are you going to win the games that you need to win? Are you going to win the games that you maybe shouldn't win, but can pull out? And that's what the Browns are going to have to do. And does Case Keenum have that in him? He has some of that in him. He has a few games here and there. He could probably get you a win that you didn't expect. But to do it over and over and over, I don't think that's the case. And that's the argument that a lot of Browns fans are having about Baker Mayfield himself. So if Case Keenum is Baker Mayfield's backup, right? And if you as a fan are questioning what Baker Mayfield's going to be able to do, then you should probably be questioning what Case Keenum's going to be able to do. And you would want your team to bring in another quarterback. So you hope that it doesn't come to that and Baker Mayfield shoulder is secure and they get that sorted out and he can play the kind of football that we've seen him play. And he can, because he's good at that. He's really good at bouncing back and using like a bad performance or an injury and coming out of that stronger. And you saw how he did in the second half of the season last year. There's nothing to say that if his injury isn't impacting him, that he wouldn't do that this year too. And so you just hope that he's able to actually do that, come back, play through that injury, but not let it affect him and have a really good second half of the season that leads them into the playoffs. And then you don't even have to worry about it. But if he's out, it's probably time to make a couple phone calls and see what you can do in that regard, because I don't think that Case Keenum is what you want to enter a really important season in a small-ish window with him at quarterback full-time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I think in the moment, people are going to be more for it than they would think they should be. But then it's also going to be one of those things that if you look at this roster in 10 years now, and this roster, like, phenomenal roster. I mean, we got like Tag McKinley coming off the bench, Jadeveon Clown's opposite side, all kind of talent all over this team. And you're going to look at this depth chart, look at this roster in 10 years, and you're going to be like, man, they really just stuck it out there with Case Keenum because Baker had hurt for the rest of the year, and just kind of be disappointed here. Let's touch on this Pittsburgh game coming up, because it is obviously Steeler week. It's kind of been buried between all of the, the Odell stuff or the Baker stuff or whatever else is going on and popping off out there. Browns versus Steelers, two teams that, well, one team that's struggling because of, we kind of saw these things coming, how they played in a wild card, and another team that is just struggling to stay healthy here. You think this is a game that the Browns should be favored in at home?
Yeah, I do still think, especially now, because there is a question of quarterback, but they are playing at home. They showed up and they showed how they can play. Now, mind you, Baker Mayfield was at quarterback, but they showed how they can play against the Steelers last year at the end of the season, in the last game, in the playoff win, and they won big. And it wasn't a question of, can they do this or was it a fluke? Because you had those back-to-back games and they look good in both of them. So I see the Browns being a favorite in this one. I think it changes a bit when you start to see the rosters line up. But, I mean, the Steelers have a quarterback problem as well. Ben Roethlisberger has not been he's at the end of his career. Let's be real. This is it. And we've seen that. We've seen moments where he can throw the ball well. He's had moments where, a lot of the early on in the season, first couple games, you're like, he has no arm strength. It's gone. It's done. Then he launched the ball down a couple fields in a couple games. So he's not washed. I mean, he still has it in him and he's still a capable quarterback, but he is at the end of his career. And you have to acknowledge that. And they've got, weapons that are dropping, and they've got injuries just the same as the Browns. Browns a little bit more last week than any team that I've seen in a really long time, but they have injury issues on their own, and they're dealing with that. So I think that you go into this contest and the Browns should look solid, whether it's Baker, whether it's Case Keenum, because the defense, we know how the defense plays against the Steelers. They're at home. They've got that energy from last season. It can't be a trap game. You have to know that they're going to come, because the Steelers don't want that to be the narrative, obviously. They don't want to see that decline and see the Browns take over and become the big brothers of that rivalry like the Steelers have been for years. But that's what it looks like is happening. So the Browns have that to play for, to prove that it's not a fluke. It wasn't just last season. We can do this. We know who you are. We know who we are. The Browns are the Browns, as everybody likes to say. And the Steelers, I mean, they're going to want to prove that narrative. I just don't think that they have not want to say talent, but they don't have what it takes right now at this point in their journey and with their roster and where they're at in the transition of players on their way out, and players kind of trying to come into their own to really hold their own against the Browns if the Browns are firing on all cylinders, which they should be because this is a very important game.
Yeah, and matchup wise, I like what I see out there too. I mean, you see the Steelers' offensive line struggled. That's really when you can get to them. And Myles Garrett out there versus a struggling offensive line, I'll take that bet any day of the week. And also, it's just the Steelers' offense. They have had bursts. Like if you look at them on paper, you're like, oh yeah, this is a good offense. Ben, they got a bunch of wide receivers, some tight ends. Have recognizable names there. But then you see them, and sometimes they look like the worst offense you have ever seen because they're just that pitiful at times offensively. It's kind of like inexplainable how bad they've been. But it's going to be an interesting matchup to see because Browns probably ain't bringing the most firepower to this game either offensively. So we'll see how everything kind of shakes out this week. Interesting week to be covering the team, Cam. Interesting week for you to come on. I want to thank you again for coming on, Cam. Let them know where to find you.
On Twitter at CammyJustice, and news5cleveland.com is where I post all my articles and write all my stuff.
Definitely, guys, make sure you check her out if you haven't already. Make sure you check out Next Man Up coming up sometime at the end of this week. So again, guys, I want to thank you guys for watching. You guys have a great day and a good night.